Well, hi everybody, and welcome to episode 20 of Level Up, 60 minutes of Q&A where your questions and votes really do drive the show. If you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, please do click on the little link in the chat and hop over to Slido, which is where you get to vote up the questions that you would most like answered, and of course to add your own. Today's theme is all about careers and improving our CVs, particularly relevant in a digital era. So let's jump straight in. Meet our panel for today. First person to join us is Jackie Hewett. She's the Operations Director and Lead Trainer over at Balance Global in the UK, where she designs, develops and delivers a whole range of education and training across their portfolio. Welcome, Jackie. Great to see you.
Morning, Nick. Morning or afternoon. So this episode is particularly interesting to me because I have quite a background in recruitment, and also we've carried out a lot of work with the European Social Fund, and the aspect there was trying to get people back into work through accredited training, helping them with their CV, giving them tips and that kind of thing. So this episode's really, really interesting.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jackie. We may well draw upon some of that expertise and experience over the next hour or so. Next, we welcome back Louisa Leung, who's the managing partner over at Lifting Lanterns in Perth in Western Australia. Louisa is a regular contributor here on Level Up. So great to see you again. Hi, Louisa.
Hi, Nick. Thanks for having me back. I'm going to enjoy this session to talk all things training, consulting, and especially around CVs. That's what we like at Lifting Lanterns.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Louisa. Next up to West Africa, Nyananso Ekanem is the managing consultant at Weircapacity, and he rejoins us today on our panel. Again, another regular contributor. Welcome, Nyananso. And I guess it's quite hot at the moment in Nigeria. Is that right?
Yes, Nick, it's quite hot here right now, and I think we're trying to use all the energy we can to set up a good cooling system. Thank you for having me back. And today's topic is quite interesting because we do consulting and training. And so to contribute to how you build your CV for the market is something we are really interested in, and we look forward to today. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Neil. So Gary Gamp is in the UK. He's a serial entrepreneur who's the very essence of what I would say is the consultant's consultant, and a very real role model for many, including myself. He's an author, a change agent, and is now hosting a growing podcast called The Company Doctor. So welcome, Gary. Welcome to Level Up.
Hey, Nick. Thank you for having me. A great intro, by the way. Looking forward to this session. Want to share some of the stuff. I'm talking to all sorts of leaders around the world on careers and performance, and looking to share some of those things. Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. And completing our panel today is James Kinch. James Kinch, he's the country manager of TrainingByeSize in Australia. And he's joining us for his, I think it's his second appearance on Level Up. Good to see you again, James.
Hey, Nick. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, in the training industry, have done for several years. Deal with project managers on a daily basis, looking to change, people looking to change careers to project management. And also trying to get to the industry. So, yeah, really happy to be here.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much indeed, panel. Now, if you're sitting watching this and you're thinking that, you know what, you could answer some of the questions and you'd really like to join us, then please just volunteer. Just hop into the chat. Colleagues will be in touch with you and we'll get you onboarded pretty soon. So let's jump straight over to our questions. We're going to hear from our question master for today, who is Charlotte, and she is joining us from the Thames Valley in the UK. Charlotte, may we have the first question, please?
Hello, everybody. We have a question from Tanya in Perth. Certificate versus degree. What's the difference, benefits, and what should I go for?
Okay, let's jump straight into that, if we may. So Nyananso first, go ahead, and then Jackie.
Okay, so I'll look at this from the perspective of executives recruiting, corporate executives. So first is, what's your career path? What do you want to do? Because for degrees, we look at if you're looking at having your role that would include research and technical writing, then I would want to see a degree. But if you're looking at specific knowledge area, for instance, the CP3P that APMG does, or the Agile Project Management, they now want to see a certificate, meaning you have the specific knowledge area that we will need as an executive in a company. So most importantly is the path you want to go. Do you want to go in the path of where you have to do a bit of research and technical writing, or do you want to go in the path where you will need specific knowledge area in a particular topic?
Okay, thanks. Jackie, and then Louisa.
Yeah, I would say it depends where you are in your career, how old you are, and how much time you have to give to it. A degree is going to take you, generally 2, 3, maybe 4 years. You might not have that amount of time to wait, and you might be more mature or whatever. There are also options where you can do a degree sort of on the side. I actually took mine in my 30s, and that worked well for me because I could do it like an evening class, part-time release and stuff like that. But if you need to get going on something quickly, then probably a certificate is going to be good for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Louisa.
Yeah, and I find a degree is kind of more general. So it's kind of like your tasting plate. You get a bit of everything. But a certificate is where you really know exactly the meal you want to eat, and you're going to hone in on specifically that one.
Thank you very much. I think, some great answers there and some great thoughts from colleagues on the panel. One thing that I would say is that there are many universities, colleges, schools of further education, business schools, who are now offering such a range of courses that it's hard to see where the traditional boundaries are any longer. So you can look at, a whole range of different types of options of courses of study, from the micro credentials that are being offered in the market, all of the way through to those multi-semester, multi-year degrees and so on. So very good luck with your studies. Let's take the next question, please, Charlotte.
We've got a question from Reese. How can I get into project management?
Go ahead, Gary, and then James.
Okay, yeah, I saw the other question flip up. But yeah, on the project management side, I think a combination of practical experience and qualifications is the answer for me. So get some projects under your belt so you can demonstrate experience, and then go and get certified so you can link the two together.
Thank you, James, and then Jackie.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. I think it's always a really good idea to get some kind of formal education or some training under your belt, obviously to boost your CV. But also there's an additional point there that when you do these certifications, what you're going to do is learn a bit more about a project manager's role, and then you're going to be able to draw from your own experiences and what you've done in the past and link these back and relate these to the project manager role. So we actually have a blog on our website called the Accidental Project Manager. So I think a lot of people manage projects without realizing. So if you do some formal training and learning a PM method, you might realize that you're already a PM or by accident.
What a great name for a blog. Thanks, James. Jackie, and then Nyananso.
Yeah, if you haven't got experience, volunteering in something like a charity or taking something like that on can really help. And I think I would second what's just been said, in that look at your personal life. You probably have managed some things before. I had an extension done on my house. What about a really big event? If you've organised a big social event or something like that, you probably have got some things you can talk about. And another way you can step into project management, if you work for maybe a large company, is through the PMO, Project Management Office. So you can often go in and sort of pick up, through doing maybe more administrative functions, what the project management, program management sort of roles are about. And it's like, it can be a stepping stone.
Right. Nyananso?
Yeah, just to add that, every day you are into project management. So whether you're leaving your home to the office or trying to set up an event, there's a project management in there somewhere. So it's just how you get into the structured project management, where you have the theory and also apply that theory to your practice, and that means you become more efficient and more effective in managing projects. But take it from us, you're already into project management.
Great, thank you. We'll come on to discuss more of that in a little while. Next question, please, Charlotte.
So, a question from Rebecca in Canberra, Australia. What's the one thing I can do today to help me progress my career, Gary?
Gary. Okay, yeah, thank you, Gary. And then Jackie.
Yeah, this is the one I thought I was answering before. I think the number one thing for me is to network. The most important thing I think you could do initially is to get yourself out there, be on the radar, be relevant, and then maybe write some blogs or write some stuff, particularly on LinkedIn is the quickest way to get started. But if you try to meet 10 to 15 people a month, that will get you confident. You'll find out what's going on in the market, and you'll be more relevant. And I think it's a good place to start.
I think you're so right, Gary. I'll come back to you in a moment. Jackie, go ahead.
Well, Gary stole my thunder. LinkedIn, and LinkedIn. Get on there. Get people to write you testimonials if you can for things you've done in the past, and it's like a public CV, isn't it?
So can we just explore this a little bit further? So Gary, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, and then we'll go to Jackie. But a lot of folks are slightly hesitant to reach out on LinkedIn. It doesn't seem to affect people that want to sell things, but they are a little bit hesitant sometimes, to link out, to reach out rather, to build those connections. Do you have any tips, to help people get over that feeling of inertia, so that they actually end up connecting with people? Gary first, and then Jackie.
You need to be. Yeah, absolutely, Nick. I think you've got to be an intentional networker and add value to them. Rather, it's not about you; it's about them. If you think from that point of view, so therefore, when you're reaching out, you're trying to connect with someone on the basis that maybe you've got something to offer them. I think if you think in those terms, you're less worried about you shouldn't try to sell people things and drive them a bit mad because it affects your credibility. So I think if you can focus on the value, that would be the good place to start.
Jackie?
I think a lot of people are used to social media, other platforms, Facebook and all these other things. It's not so different, it's a professional one, really. So start off with people you do know, you genuinely do know, and build it up and take it from there.
Nyananso?
Yes, I think some profiles on LinkedIn are very intimidating. And so sometimes you're very worried about, wow, how do I connect with this person? But I can tell you, if you can't prepare your own profile based on what you have in terms of your experience, and your certifications and everything, then there's no harm. And I tell you, whoever you're connecting to will not want to see comparable degrees. They want to see what you've got to offer in terms of your experience and expertise. So I think why people, have that inertia is because of some intimidating, profiles out there. But I tell you, just make that connection, and then you'll be surprised your profile is good enough to go.
And Louisa, last word, please.
Yeah, and I think sometimes people still find the human touch a bit more engaging, so that you only want to send out a connection after you've met them. So there are things like memberships that you can join. So previously there was a question about project management. You could join the PMI, for example, and go to some of the events and actually network there, which is what Gary was saying. Network there, get yourself out there, get some new people in front of you, and then you can connect with them on LinkedIn and continue from there as well.
James, you're a good networker. Anything else to add?
I would say, yeah, I think the networking point is really important. But if you're in a current role and you're looking to progress your career in your current role, I think it would be a really good idea to actually voice your opinion and talk to your manager. They might not realize that you're ambitious or you're looking for a new role. Having that conversation, a lot of people might be a bit daunting initially to have, but that could open up doors. That could, be company sponsored training, or it could be a role that's not been announced by the organization. So also look internally as well for opportunities.
Yeah, really good point, and very well made. Thank you very much, panel. Charlotte, let's take the next question, please.
We've got a question from Sam, Perth, Australia. What are your career aspirations and how will you get there? What are those on the panel currently working on?
It's a really great phrased question. Jackie, jump in first. Go ahead.
Well, running your own business is always challenging, and I'd like to continue to grow Balance Global. We're always looking at new products, and I'm quite interested in new technology and gaming. And if I can bring gaming at all into what we do, not as a mechanism to reinforce what you've learned, but as a way to learn. So I'm really quite interested in that and trying to sort of explore if we can partner with various different people to make that happen. And beyond that, really looking to grow my team. I've got some great people on board with us, and really seriously investing in them, the good old investors in people, and watching them grow.
Okay, Gary?
Yeah, I worked for big corporates for a long time, but always wanted to work for myself. So about 14 years ago, I forced myself into working for myself. And thinking about it, it was the right time. It was the best thing I ever did. And then the second thing, I always was quite keen to do either write a book or do a podcast. So I did an audio book, which is a lazy way to write a book. And then from that got into podcasting. So now I've got a regular podcast. So I think it's do what you take action. I think is probably the biggest thing I would say. If you've got career aspirations, it's easy to talk about them and be too busy, but do something about them because you'll feel great about it. And even if you make a mistake, you've got a chance to change that. At least you did it. That's what I would say. They're my career aspirations.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And I think, on behalf of everybody, brilliant question. Thank you very much indeed, Sam. Let's move on now. Panel, we need to pick up the pace a little bit because the questions are stacking up. Go ahead, Charlotte.
Question from Manish in Delhi, India. I'm contemplating a career change. What's the best advice you can give me before I take this step?
Okay, James.
I would say that before you do anything, before you actually take any steps, the first thing is just to sit down and kind of define your idea of success and what a successful career looks like for you, because it could be anything from, a pay rise or working less hours, spending more time with family. So, everyone's completely different. So I'd be really, really clear about what you want, and also look 5 years, 10 years down the line, because your priorities might change. So sit down, define that, and then take action from there.
Thanks, Gary.
I think a lot of the challenges, as soon as we start working, although our goal was maybe to be a fireman or an astronaut, we end up not doing that. And then we get caught up in our careers. So I think we should always be contemplating a career change. I don't mean we should always keep changing, but we should try to get back to what we always wanted to do and see if there's a path to doing it. So my best advice is work out what you really like doing and what you don't like doing in the roles that you've done, and try and give yourself time so you're not under pressure. So always look at your career so that you're always evolving and moving. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, Jackie, then Louisa.
Yeah, if you can integrate something you're passionate about into your work life, it's going to be more enjoyable and you're probably going to do better and go further. And I think reiterating what some of the others have said before me is work-life balance. To try not to lose sight of that. It's really easy to sort of get to head down. But if it's a passion as well, I don't know, it's easier.
Louisa?
I think it's important for people to also look at their transferable skills so that they don't feel like it's a complete career change where they've got to drop everything and start from zero. There are things that we can take from between careers and things that we constantly have strengths in.
Yeah, well said. And I think increasingly now people are developing portfolio careers. It's no longer the case that you join one organization and you have to stay in that organization. People's mobility is much higher. And, if you're looking to make a change, then I would say, think carefully about what it is that you're passionate about. If you can find and involve some of your passions, into your work, then it becomes less like work and more like hobby, and you look forward to every day. That's great. Let's move on now, Charlotte, please. And Panel, let's keep it tight, please.
A question from Sarah in Canberra, Australia. How can I know if a career in project management would suit me?
Jackie?
Ask another project manager. Try and sit with them and find out what the day-to-day job is really about.
Excellent advice. Get right in there. Get on that network. You can find project managers really easily on LinkedIn. Charlotte, next question, please.
From Sarah, what's the worst career decision you have made? Why was it a bad decision?
This is an interesting one. For me personally, it was about, trying to progress my career without thinking about who I was going to work for next. that was my biggest mistake. Recovered from it, but nonetheless, it kind of brought home how important, who you work with and what their philosophy is and what their culture of that organization is. Super, super important. Nyananso and then James.
I think, there are quite a number of them, but I think the most significant one for me, because as you go through your career path, things will change. And so your career, interest would also change. So your career interest will also change. So I think it's important that you know that things will change over time. For me, the experience was when I had a very bad manager that required my time, 24 hours a day, which I needed time for family, and that really impacted, my relationship with family, which I had to leave at some point. But you need to be sure that the work environment is conducive for you to be able to deliver both at home and at work.
James and then Gary.
So not necessarily a career decision, but one of the mistakes that I've made, and I think a lot of people make, is not taking enough opportunities. And I think that you can always say no to things and turn things down. Let's say you've gone for a series of interviews and you've got the job, which a company that really like, and you've still got a few interviews lined up. I would say go for those interviews anyway, get the experience, because you never know. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because having options is really important as well.
Thanks, Gary.
I think a lot of people will take a job on the rebound. I remember I worked for someone who contravened my values, let's say, and was technically an underlying bully. So basically, I don't know if everyone's been in a situation where Sunday night before you go to work, you get loads of pit in your stomach because you're worried about going to work. If you're ever in that situation, your boss is a bully, not an implied bully, then I think you should take your time and get out, because you can correct a career mistake. Don't be under pressure. You've got the skills. You just need to take your time, but do it. Don't put up with it. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. Working in a toxic environment just brings on that toxicity, and it gets into you somehow or another, over time, and you end up not being the person that you really truly are. And there's little point in that. You step away from that, and look to the horizon and set your sights on something different. Very good, Charlotte. Next question, please.
Question from Rosie R. What's the future of project management? Where should I be investing my training?
So the future of project management is definitely evolving. It's evolving at pace. Jackie, let's come to you first.
I think the future for project management is bright. I think there are a lot of opportunities out there, and it's particularly focusing more also on the change aspect and how much change is there in the world today. Change, as we know, is projects. That's what facilitates change. It's picking up, isn't it?
Thanks, James.
Yeah, I think project management's a very transferable skill. I think that you've got the opportunity to move. There's growth, so I'd be following those industries and looking at the industries that are recovering well, kind of post-pandemic. Also, in terms of training, I think that what we're going to see in terms of where to invest in your training is perhaps in the more flexible, more adaptable approaches, project management frameworks. Because I think there's going to be less place for kind of the more rigid, more controlled project management approaches in the future.
Thanks very much indeed. Some great answers there. The one thing I would add to that is, look beyond a single methodology framework or toolkit, and start to read and interact with people that use different techniques and different ways of doing things. Because project managers, I think the best are those who are able to blend a whole variety of different tools, techniques, methods, and experiences together to deliver the very best outcomes that they can on behalf of the sponsoring organisation. So next question, please, Charlotte.
We have a question from a live viewer, Milvayo. How are APMG certifications perceived in the marketplace?
Okay, so that's a very broad and wide-ranging question. I think certainly from APMG's point of view, it will vary depending on what the discipline is that you're trying to learn and whereabouts you are in the world. But I'll come back to a little bit of how we go about selecting them in the first place after hearing from Nyananso.
I mean, I will speak from our experience in Africa during delivering the CP3P certification training for public-private partnership. APMG certifications are very well respected because, one, the curriculum is structured, very well structured. It's also something you can apply almost immediately after your training. And also, two, the fact that you have to take an exam that is very well organized, very well proctored, gives that confidence that you have the knowledge of that topic. You have the knowledge of that topic. So it's very well respected in Africa. And so if you have that certification, it's something that will progress your career and is respected in your CV.
Okay, Louisa?
I think APMG certifications are still very strong in the marketplace because it's recognized internationally. It has a high quality with it. There's a lot of governance around it. So people know the products quite well as well. So we provide all of the change suite, the agile suite. So people recognize these in the industry. So it is definitely still very strong, APMG certifications, and I would definitely recommend it still.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a founder of a certification that is exclusively run by APMG. And just to give some perspective from my point of view, I chose APMG because I needed the credibility and the breadth. And that's really been valuable as an owner of a certification. So I think it's been really helpful for me.
Thank you, Gary. It's good to hear that. From APMG's perspective, we work with a very broad group now of scheme owners. These are the people like Gary that have an idea and they want to work with us to be able to take those ideas to market in the form of qualifications of different kinds. Some are very large, some are governments, some are very small, but they have a very deep understanding of a particular area of interest and what is, ultimately good or leading practice in that discipline. So APMG's criteria really for bringing a certification to market begins with the view that says who says whether or not this particular certification is good. So we work with a lot of membership bodies, we do a lot of research, we think very carefully about the partners that we sign up and that we work with to take their qualifications to the market around the world. Some of our products are less well known than others, and that's where I think it's quite an interesting view because everybody wants to take the most popular courses, but the most popular courses were built from the very first person saying, do you know what, agile project management, that looks like quite interesting, or you know what, I'd like a qualification in organizational change or in service management in IT, or so on and so on and so on. And over time, that builds into almost a tsunami-sized wave that sweeps around the world. And people then recognize the brand name of the product and the qualification instantly and so on. So I would say have a look across our portfolio because some of the smaller products that you have to read about today to understand them are actually likely to be some of those rising stars and the ones that you will recognize in 5 years' time when you're mid-career rather than where you are just right now. So thank you, panel. Very good. Charlotte, let's move on. We've got one more question before we jump into the focus topic.
Question from Tom C. What interview tips can you give me for my next job?
Okay, Gary?
Yeah, I think the most important one is the research and planning before you go for the interview. So what's the company, where they're going, obviously what's the role, and think through your answers to the questions they're going to ask you because they're standard questions they'll ask you. So that will give you confidence throughout the interview. And then one final tip, well, there's loads of tips, but just in the time I've got, is think of a bloody good question to ask at the beginning that gives them the chance to think, you know what you're talking about, you've done some research, and that will hold you well through the interview.
Thank you. Jackie, then Louisa.
Yeah, I'd say practice. So especially if you're new to going on interviews, get somebody to sort of ask you some tricky questions and see how you do against those. And for sure, do your research. We had a question earlier about what was the worst career decision you made, and mine was to join a company I hadn't researched very well, and it didn't work out so well. So yeah, practice and research.
Okay, Nyananso and then James.
Make sure
sorry.
you show some Sorry.
That's okay, Nyananso.
I apologize.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead,
so just make sure
we'll
you
come
show
to Louisa next.
Yeah, show some confidence. Show some confidence in whatever you're saying. Your responses will have to come with some high level of confidence to show that you know what you're talking about. Maintain that confidence throughout.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Louisa.
I agree with the rest of the panel there. I think preparation, lots of preparation, but a lot of the times it's actually saying it out loud. So whether that's with a partner, with a friend, some of your answers, it actually is quite different in your head than it is when you actually say it out loud to somebody else, and get them to give you feedback as well. So even if they don't know your area of topic, at least get them to hear it and you've said it and you've actually come a bit more prepared. And also get yourself a list of questions that you think you might ask at the end, because you just don't want that silence when they go, "You got any questions for us?" and you're just staring at them.
Okay, perfect. James, final thoughts.
I would say that the interview starts before you sit down and shake hands with the interviewer. So just be wary of who's in the building and who you're going to meet on the train or your commute. So just be in that kind of interview mode, as soon as you leave your house. And then when you get there, one of the main things for me is to turn up the energy and the enthusiasm and just, feel really happy to be there. And especially if it's a phone call or it's a video call like it is these days, even more so to do that. So yeah, put a lot of energy and enthusiasm into the job interview. Definitely,
thanks. And it reminded me of a situation. I actually let a young lady ahead of me in a coffee shop on the morning that I was interviewing for a new role, and then I met her around about 2 hours later, and she was one of the candidates. So that was quite interesting, and we've talked about it. She was successful, actually. We've talked about it a lot ever since. So very good. Well, look, thank you very much indeed, panel. Some great questions there, and some fantastic insights and answers as well. So we're going to change gears now a little bit, and we're going to spend a bit more time with Gary, who we've invited to join me for our focus topic next. So for those of you who are in Slido and you want to follow along and add your questions for Gary, then please just click on the focus topic tab. CVs themselves have changed a great deal since I began my career. In those times, we kind of wrote them for print. The idea was that you'd send out physical copies to potential employers and agencies and the like, for them to read. And since that time, EHR, machine learning, selection algorithms, and machine automation has largely taken over. So what difference does this really all make for us, and how best do we author to catch the eye of those modern selection systems? So Gary, look, if we want to create or maybe even update our resume, where do we actually begin? What are the key things you feel that we should first consider?
Yeah, I'm going to come from a strange place, I guess, because I think you shouldn't start until you've done a number of things. Because I think the goal of the CV is to get to an interview. The goal of the CV is not to get the job. I mean, ultimately it is. The goal of the CV is to get to the interview, and the goal of the interview is to get the job. So take the pressure off and think in terms of, how do I get this to the interview? And then in order to improve your chances, it's better to find a warm contact or referral or someone who knows that space and do your research about the company. So I'm almost stepping back before I'm writing anything, which is you need to spend some time doing some research. Who are the people? What's the company? Where they're going? What's the strategy? And then what is, obviously based on the job description, what is your relevant skill to that role? And now you can start writing and aligning your CV to the job using their language and the job description. That would be my starting point. And then the other thing is, and there were some questions on the chat, Nick, about do I have one CV? I think you should have multiple CVs with a core. So you start with the core you, and then not manipulation, but adapt your CV to them and the role and the language, because most people won't read many pages, so they're reading the beginning bit and they're looking for something, and you want to be able to get a hit. That would be my quick and long answer to your question. Sorry.
Yeah, and I think that's that's really, really important that you tailor. It's not about changing. You should not change yourself fundamentally, your experience and so on. But I do think there's an opportunity to highlight relevant elements of it. So if you've worked in a particular industry before and that's relevant, then pulling that out and highlighting that makes complete sense to me. How do you manage the situation, Gary, where maybe you're looking to change industries? How would you highlight the relevant elements from that core CV, if you like, to bring those out to the front?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going for a job, you've got to have some of that experience in there, unless you're really starting from scratch. And I'll talk about that separately. So you've got to be able to highlight where you've done these types of things before. Because the truth is, the person on the receiving end of the CV is looking for evidence, and therefore they're looking for trigger words in their language. So you've got to be able to pull up. I'm a professional services guy by trade, so I've been consulting. So I need to put that in near the front, because no one reads down, to be honest. So let's highlight my experience in professional services really early on. And if you don't have experience, then obviously it's going to be difficult to get the job because the people are looking for it, but you might need to go and get some before you apply for that job.
Yeah, and it's so important when you're thinking about who is reading the CV in the first place, because actually it's not a human being. Most of the time nowadays, if you're applying to a larger organization, there's a bit of software which is reading your CV first, and you need to reflect some keywords, some skills, some things from the job advertisement, if you like, from that notice of somebody wanting to hire. You need to reflect some of those things, throughout the copy, so that that machine learning algorithm can pick them up and allow you through that very first barrier, if you like, into the next stage. So look, Gary, I know that it's a strong market for some roles at the moment in particular countries, but it does remain highly competitive for the very best jobs and with the very best employers. How would we go about influencing with impact? What should we focus on?
I think you need to look through the lens of the person that may be reading it. I know a lot of the times you may not know that, and it's not one person, but you've got to think through the lens of what is the type of company, what is the role, what do you think that person might be looking for if you were them? And then also think about yourself. If you were reading your CV, would you be impressed with what you see? So I'm kind of anti going to get a professional CV because I think it doesn't look genuine. Some people might disagree with me, but I think overall, make it look professional because you've got to differentiate. So make it you. And then once you've looked through the lens of the people, you've got to try and help them join the dots from the CV. So you want to a lot of people say, I'm an ambitious guy and I'm great under pressure. And it's just, so what, a lot of people do it. Sorry to be offensive, but pull together, make your introduction, some people call it the elevator pitch, compelling, that someone goes, okay, this person's got something about them and it's a bit different. It's not the usual I love working under pressure thing. So I think if you can grab them in the early stages of your CV, because they're not going to read past a couple of, but they're going to scan through looking for words they're looking for, being just disingenuous probably. But the impact is it looks professional, but I'm helping them join the dots. So would be the things I would really recommend people to do.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think getting across something about you in those opening, kind of remarks are super important. And you don't need to Gary's point earlier, you don't need to, tell your whole story in this. You just need to put the hooks, if you like, provide the Velcro hooks that are designed to catch on to the hiring organization's loops, if that makes sense, and allow for that to be, expanded on in interview and almost make it so that, the people really want to, hear more about you. A good friend of mine works in academia as a professor at Oxford University. And I was asking her about, how do you actually find those students who on paper don't appear necessarily to be, your classic, top performer, but nonetheless would benefit from, the kind of teaching and learning that goes on at the university. And she was sharing with me very similar things, Gary. She was saying that, they're looking beyond the words, because on LinkedIn you can find the most mundane things described, the most over the top language. And so, what she looks for is kind of sincerity. Make your CV sound like you have written it yourself. How important do you feel authenticity is in that, getting that voice to be yours?
I think it's massively important, because you're looking for someone's experience, but you're looking for the right fit and the right attitude. And it's hard for that to come across on paper or on digital. But the being authentic part is probably the secret ingredient that people underestimate. They're so busy putting their experience down, which is important. But it's not the only thing. Most of the decisions are made around the fit. So if you can come across and give stories of things that you have done that demonstrate that relevant experience rather than the blah, blah, blah thing, then I think it would help connect with the person that's reading.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've both received, I would imagine by now, thousands of CVs from, prospective candidates in our times. As the hiring manager, what is it really that you are looking for, and what would stand out for you?
Yeah, you are looking for a connect. So when you're looking through lots of CVs, in my previous roles where I had lots of roles and it takes up a lot of time, you're sifting, and you are looking for someone that's got the right experience in the right companies, maybe. I think the word experience is the one for me initially. And so, for example, if someone's done something, even if it's not relevant in a work experience, they've gone out. I coach a lot of people, and I recommend they go to get experience. And if they can demonstrate that they organised, someone talked about project management earlier, they've organised a very large event, and they relate that back to that's where they got their practical experience of project management in their CV. I think that stands out. And I think also the authentic attitude of the person, without it being a blah, blah thing, makes it stand out for me. So, and obviously their track record is key, but you can't make up your track record. You've either got it or you haven't. But the other things I think you can highlight and bring them to the fore.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much indeed. It's a fascinating area, and it is something that changes all of the time. And the one other thought that I would have before we kind of go back to the panel, which we'll do in a moment, is to share a draft with somebody who's good at editing. Okay, because sometimes you just I don't know, but when I write something, my first draft is never the best. So I find it personally very helpful to kind of say, look, here's a first draft of this. What do you think? And allow somebody else to read it almost cold, and come back to you with their thoughts and their suggestions.
I think it's a great idea. The other one is spelling. So the people presume that the Word or whatever document editor they're using is doing a spell check, and there's so many CVs that come across that have mistakes in the spelling, and that's really off-putting for people. Or they've cut and paste their CV and didn't do it very well. So the level of having a level of detail. So I think that's a great idea, Nick, to get someone to have a look at it. Someone sent me a CV over the weekend for that reason. Said that have a look at this. Tell me the truth. Could I do anything better? And if I am helping people, I would always start at the top and go, right, have you nailed the description of you as a person? That's the starting point. The next one is, what is the job role? Show me the job description. What are the highlights of that role? And have you connected to the highlights of that role in their language? That's the key thing for me. It's got to be in their language because they're looking for it. And if you don't, it's a miss. And then the third thing is, not to be long and boring. So a no scroll rule, 2, maximum 3 pages, and highlighting in each of those roles what you did that's relevant to the role again. So if you kind of bang on about all the amazing stuff you did, no one cares. What they care about is that you did something for this role and have the experience. So that's how I would help someone who sent me their CV. And that's, if I'm on the receiving end, that's what I'm looking for. Hopefully that helps a bit.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Thank you very much indeed. So some really, really interesting coaching points there. So thank you very much, Gary. Let's go back to our panel. I know that the questions have been stacking up. We're getting a lot of activity actually on some of the chat on social media as well. So Charlotte, let's take the first question, if we may, please, on our focus topic.
I think we've got a question from one of our panelists. Jackie, what should I do about employment gaps?
This is a pretty common thing, really, isn't it, Jackie? How do you approach this sort of situation where somebody's maybe, had a year or a couple of years out or even longer?
I was talking to a recruiter literally last week about this. This is why I put the question up, and I thought it was really interesting. People used to try and hide gaps, and I just don't think that's the way forward. Own up, say, yep, I had a gap. The more authentic you can be about it, the better. And rather strangely, COVID has helped. So many people got laid off in the last year or so. So if it's a recent gap, I think, just be upfront and say, yeah, I got laid off. It's the way the world is at the moment. But one of the things this recruiter said to me is kind of a bit of a red flag, if you like, is don't just put home improvements, because everybody does that. Try and try and say a little bit more than that. You might have been being a carer for an elderly parent or something, but don't go with the home improvements was a good general piece of advice.
Okay, very good. All right, James, next. Thank you.
Just echoing Jackie. Just the first thing is to actually acknowledge it. Especially now it's more and more common, especially with redundancies. And I think that, eventually if you don't acknowledge it, then it will come out, and that's kind of worse down the line, during reference checks or something else. And also you can talk about if it was a job loss, how you overcame that challenge and how your experience of that gave you some new skills to apply to this role. So you can kind of spin it on its head a little bit as well.
Yeah, completely right. Thank you very much, panel. We're going to press on because we've got so many questions, but some great answers there. Be authentic, explain what it is, and move away from DIY. Very good. Charlotte, next question, please.
Question from a live viewer. Ooh. Do you think that creating a Word document CV is becoming outdated in business? Do you think a focus on a digital CV or a strong LinkedIn profile is better in a digital world?
Okay, well, most certainly the latter, but you do need to think about the size of the organization that you are joining. Okay, large organizations generally will have quite a lot of filters before a human being is really looking, in depth at you. But do work with a variety of different helpers and inputs, as we've described previously. And we're going to move straight on to the next question, if that's okay. I would say digital first, most definitely, just right now. Let's try and speed up so we can fit in as many questions as we can. Go ahead.
Question from Gabrielle Bobby. What is the most important information recruiters want to see in a CV?
Jackie?
Relevance. And it's all about R's for me, relevance. And I heard my recruiter friends the other day say results over responsibilities. And that stuck with me. I think that's quite good. People are so used to putting down lots of responsibilities. No, what difference did you make? What was relevant to this job?
Okay, Gary?
I would say value. So, being able to connect to the value that you can offer, which is kind of what Jackie's saying as well, but not just the results, but the value you can offer in doing this role from the experience, drawing on the experience you've had.
Nyananso?
Most definitely value, just like what Gary has said. But more importantly is your CV, if you're a fresher, maybe just a fresh graduate, you just need to also show potential. That means what do you have that can be built over time? Do you have the potential to learn? Do you have potential to be taught? Can you apply a new knowledge quickly? That's very important.
Okay. Thank you, James.
Yeah, we like seeing as well a cover letter with the CVs and, including why you think you're suited for the role and make this geared towards what your employer wants, not what you want. Or, don't put, I want a job because it has, the hours suit me, say how much of contribution you can make to the organization. I think that's quite effective.
Thank you, Gary.
Yeah, I think there's some people that are listening or watching are worried that they don't have experience. And so how do I get started when I don't have experience? And you're not even getting to that stage. And I've been coaching some young people. Now, I've recommended that if they don't have experience, they need to get some. So maybe they need to do some freelancing or some free work in order to get experience to show that they've done something before. So I think people shouldn't be scared of it. I know it's not immediate because the CV's now, but I think you should invest in getting experience so that you've got something to talk about and differentiate with.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you can evidence that volunteering so well now with things like social media. We do have, charitable organisations. We've got volunteering. We've got a whole range of non-government organisations who have social media presences that you could help with and, build your evidence base by being able to show this is what I did, this is where I made my contribution, this is how I helped, this organisation and so on. So really, really good. Do get somebody to edit it, just based on that responsibility. A comment that was a little bit earlier. I do remember with some, humour, reading a sentence that said that a particular applicant had been responsible for all the complaints in their company for the last 10 years. And I know what they meant, but perhaps not the best phrasing. Charlotte, next question, please.
So we have a question from Rebecca in Canberra. Should I include a link to my LinkedIn profile on my CV?
Panel, what are your thoughts on this one, linking to your LinkedIn profile, Louisa?
I think in this day and age, it's important. But the most important thing actually is that your Word document or PDF, whichever you're going with, is actually going to match your LinkedIn if you're going to send a link. I have had people send a link and then the job titles didn't match, the years didn't match, and it's something like two different people because they updated one but not update the other. So if you are going to, make sure they do actually match.
Gary, and then Nyananso.
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I mean, work on your LinkedIn profile as much as your CV, treat them as one, and be able to tell the story in a combined way. Absolutely agree with that.
Nyananso, and then James.
Yes, you should include your LinkedIn profile, but whether you do or not, most recruiters will check you out on LinkedIn as well. So just know that you'll be checked out. But it's good to include
Absolutely. Absolutely. James, and then Jackie.
Yeah, I think as well, just a little tip with that is to customize the URL. So, not unnecessary numbers or letters, and make it a little bit more personable and put that in the header of your CV. And that always looks a lot more appealing to a recruiter as well.
Okay, thank you. Jackie, last words.
Yeah, I'm going to echo everything that everybody else has said. Yes, do. But something that can be quite useful, because we're in this age of sort of soundbitism, you can put more maybe on your LinkedIn. Maybe you can go back a bit further. And, you have blogs and things like that you can put on your LinkedIn, which add a bit more depth. So if your CV is going to be maybe 2 pages, people can find out more about you on LinkedIn.
Excellent advice. Thank you very much. So we can take one more question, I think. Charlotte, please go ahead.
What a question from Winifred. At what point is a referee needed on the CV? Because most recruiters do not ask for referees at the initial stage.
So it's a good question. It does vary from market to market. What happens in West Africa, Nyananso?
So first, you want to know the person first. You want to be sure that the person you want to contact, the referees, is someone that has the potential to be recruited. So you want to sieve out all others that you don't need to reference. So at the beginning, I don't need to see your referees, but at the stage where I'm interviewing you for a potential position and you're most likely to be recruited, then I want to ask for your referees.
Thank you. Gary, your thoughts, please?
Yeah, well, I think obviously referees are needed, but it's a defensive play. I think the proactive way is to use your referees to help you. So, for example, if you know someone that works in that company, or someone can refer you, or there's some connection to you, that's so much more powerful. Obviously, you need it afterwards, but that's a defensive play. Be offensive and try to use your referee to say you're a good person, or to give you an inside track. That's what I would always recommend.
I think that's super important. It's particularly true now as large organizations have moved away from the traditional narrative and constrain often employees in terms of what they can say in writing, about a potential candidate. So the best way to leverage is to leverage your network. If you've got a great network, then the chances are somebody who is able to help you in a given situation. And that network builds organically, it builds over time. So if you have 10 connections on LinkedIn today, or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000, you have to work at it all of the time. Constantly look for people who you admire, who you think make interesting contributions to the community, and you feel should be in your network. And that's exactly how Level Up works. Each of these folks who have been sharing their experience today as panelists with all of you have been joined together by that golden thread of enabling others and wanting to help and being part of the APMG network. So great job, panel. I'm going to come to each of you now, if I may, for your closing thoughts. So Gary, I'm going to start with you, and then we'll hear from Nyananso.
Yeah, I think my closing thoughts are the best thing you can do is to warm up your contact. So if there's some connection to where you're interviewing for and preparing your CV for, try to warm that up to get some kind of referral recommendation. And then connect. My takeaway is try to match the language to the role description so that your CV is relevant and you connect quicker and have a better chance of getting to the interview, because the goal is to get to the interview, not to get the job through the CV.
Thank you, Nyananso, and then Louisa.
Just a quick advice: consistent learning. Keep learning. There are several things that may become your career path. Where you are now might not be where you will be in the next 5 years. And something you're learning today might just be your next career path. So keep learning, keep improving your profile, keep improving your CVs, and then you'll make some good progress.
Thank you, Louisa, and then James.
Yeah, so I think even if you're not looking for a career change or you're not looking for a new job, it's still good to keep your CV and your LinkedIn up to date. So always have it up to date, just to reflect on where you are now and just to keep it fresh.
Thanks, Louisa. James, and then Jackie.
I think that those who've been watching and career and project management, I think now's the time to do so. There's lots of exciting things happening. It's very fast paced. There's lots of emerging technologies like VR and AI coming into it as well. And there's a whole variety of skills that are needed. So I'd say invest in your training, invest in your interview skills, and, a range of opportunities are there for the taking.
Thank you very much. Jackie?
Yeah, I think be authentic. We've talked about that quite a lot. Be yourself, make sure that shines through, and be aware of your digital footprint. We've talked a lot about LinkedIn, and that's the obvious sort of professional choice, but be careful with those other social media platforms, that there isn't something on any of those that you don't want someone to find. So maybe a bit of a clean-up on those.
Okay, all right, good advice. And Charlotte, it's been a very active session today. We've had a lot of questions that we've not been able to get to, so we're going to have to roll those over. But your closing thoughts for us.
I think this is a really interesting area where there's been lots of discussion, both received through Slido before, during, and I'm sure we will continue to receive them. The LinkedIn chat for this live event has been super busy as well. So we definitely need another episode of this Level Up chat.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll certainly get that scheduled in. Thank you very much indeed, panel. Great job, everybody. So let's move on then to look forwards in terms of Level Up. Coming up later on today at 1 o'clock GMT, 2 in Europe and 8 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We continue our look at careers. This time we're going to consider all about kind of acquiring new skills in communication, skills in collaboration, and also skills that can get you out of all kinds of difficult situations around facilitation. How do you get the best out of the meeting, the situation, the workshop that you are in? All key to delivering positive change outcomes, of course. So that's at 1 p.m. GMT, 2 in Europe and 8 on the Eastern Seaboard. Next Monday at this time, we'll be looking at online learning, and we'll be looking specifically at the electronic collaboration tools and techniques that are used in virtual classrooms and workshops to deliver the best learning outcomes. Later on in the same day, we're going to be picking up project and change management with a focus this time on program managers. What is their role and their responsibilities, and what do they really need to deliver programs of projects both at pace and at scale? Subscribe to the show and we'll send you a personal summary of what's coming up and how you can join us here on the panel and level up your career with APMG. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll see you on the next show.